Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says he's preparing to welcome the highest-level U.S. delegation to Kyiv since Russia invaded 2 months ago. The Sunday visit by Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd comes on the heels of a deadly missile strike on the port city of Odesa. Zelenskyy says an infant was among the 8 people killed. He says he'll ask the Americans for new weapons to stop a new Russian onslaught in Ukraine's south and east. And DW correspondent Jan-Philip Schultz joins us from the western Ukrainian city of Lviv. Jan-Philip, Zelenskyy denounced the attack on Odessa in his nightly TV address. What else did he say?
Yes, indeed. President Zelenskyy put a very strong emphasis on the attacks on Odessa during his speech. I was in Odessa myself some weeks ago, and the cultural and economic significance of this port city for Ukraine can't be overestimated, and there have been fears regarding major attacks on the city for a while. President Zelenskyy also mentioned the story of a 3-month-old baby that was apparently killed in the attack, a baby that has just seen war during its short life. This and the fact that the attacks took place during Easter celebrations, the Orthodox Easter celebrations, and apparently hit residential areas, led to very emotional reactions here in Ukraine.
And just to move to another part of the country, the port city of Mariupol, which we've been watching for weeks now, is expected to fall at any moment. What more can you tell us about the overall situation, both military and civilian?
Well, there are still fightings in Mariupol, especially around the Azov steel plant, where many Ukrainian fighters and hundreds of civilians are trapped. As you know, President Putin said that he wants to block any access to the plant. In general, the humanitarian situation in the city is disastrous. Tens of thousands of civilians are still trapped there, and attempts to evacuate people have failed recently. Ukrainian officials also claim that Russians have tried to forcibly deport residents to Russian territory in the past days.
Yeah, and just to get to the diplomacy now, an impending visit by top U.S. officials. As we were just saying, Zelenskyy has said this is going to be a big meeting. He's got a big ask for them. What can we expect to occur in this encounter?
Yes, indeed. President Zelenskyy announced some hours ago that top U.S. officials will visit the country. Of course, the topic of military aid will be very high on the agenda. President Zelenskyy has a concrete list of weapons that he says Ukraine needs. As you know, President Zelenskyy says that leaders shouldn't come empty-handed to Ukraine, but in the case of the United States, he doesn't have to worry about this. The United States have already provided several billions of US dollars of military aid, and they have increased their commitments, including heavy weapons. And President Zelenskyy will probably also ask the US delegation to put more pressure on its Western allies, especially Germany, to provide more weapons.
Okay, DW correspondent Jan-Philip Schultz in Lviv, Ukraine. Thanks for that. We're going to be joined now by our expert, Ruth Diamond, who is lecturer for war studies at London's King College. Top U.S. officials are going to Kyiv on Sunday to discuss Ukraine's request for more powerful weapons. Do Ukrainian forces have what they need?
I think it's difficult to say, because we'll have to see how the next phase of the conflict pans out. But certainly what we have seen in recent weeks is a willingness by the United States to step up to provide weapons to an extraordinary level. I mean, in the last 2 weeks alone, they've provided over $1.5 billion worth of military assistance, which is a staggering sum. So the US clearly are willing now, I think, to fully step up and provide Ukraine with what they need.
And just going over to the Russian side, do they have what they need in terms of personnel, weapons, logistics, and so on?
I mean, it's hard to be clear at this stage, but one has to say it seems unlikely. The Russian side have taken extremely heavy losses in terms of personnel and equipment, and of course, heavy losses not just of ordinary soldiers, but also of senior officers, of generals. And these are people who can't be replaced instantly. Soldiers need to be trained, obviously. Equipment needs to be made, so they don't have limitless quantities of military equipment. So it's hard to see, given the rate at which they have been losing personnel and losing equipment, it's hard to see that they really have the resources to conduct an effective war now going forward, I think.
And just about the attack on Odesa, which was condemned by the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, is there any reason to believe that Russia is trying to take over the critical port city soon, or was it perhaps more symbolic, even a sign of frustration, do you think?
I think possibly a little of both. I mean, again, we're not 100% sure, but, Odesa is a key city in all sorts of ways. It's strategically important. It's also symbolically important. And the Russians have said that they are moving to this new phase of conflict in which they want to take the south. And it's one of the key cities in the south. Now, I mean, this is a huge scaling down of their original war aims. So that in itself, I think, is a sign of weakness and frustration. But yeah, I mean, I would imagine that we may well see more of this in the coming weeks.
And just a final question, if I may, about the other port city of Mariupol, very strategic and symbolic. Its fall seems all but certain now from what we hear. If it is taken by the Russians, what will this mean for the balance of power and the battlefield space overall?
Obviously, it's extremely important for Russia in all sorts of ways, both because of the strategic importance of the city, as you say. I think it's also symbolically important for Russia because they have so far failed to achieve any really significant victories. And given that they are looking for victories, and there are reports that, we don't know if they're true, that Putin wants to be able to kind of announce some kind of victory on the Armed Forces Day on the 9th of May. Being able to claim that Mariupol is fully under Russian control, I think, would be very helpful for them. Whether that's going to be the case remains to be seen.
Okay, Ruth Derrimond of King's College in London, thank you so much for that insight.